Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 57. And we're continuing on with Paul Elder's Eyes of an Angel. A marvelous little primer on what happens when you get out of your body and all the fun stuff you can learn to do. I keep trying to skip bits of this because there's lots more. And I keep going, no, you can't skip that bit. It's too good. So, some more stuff from Paul Elder. Some more vitally revealing out-of-body experiences. Even though I had experienced many remarkable encounters in the spirit world, the final session of the week proved to be the most profound. After moving quickly through the various levels, I was joined by two spirits who wanted to take me to their lost charge. One of the entities was a spirit guide, while the other had been the grandfather of a soul we were to retrieve. Although I wasn't given the name of the guide, I was told that the grandfather's name was Alejandro. The name of the young man we were searching for was Marcos. Following a short burst of movement, we emerged on the ground in a heavily vegetated jungle-like area. It seemed to be about mid-afternoon. The sun shone brightly in the warm, humid air. This was the same place Melder had taken me on our first tour. My impression was of a rural area somewhere in South America. I could feel the vibrations of both spirits that accompanied me, but could only make out the faint form of the grandfather. As I stood in the green grass of a small clearing, the memory of the disturbing scene of my earlier visit returned. We would be looking for a body with a vicious neck wound draped over a fence. Our immediate surrounding was familiar. The old, weathered, three-board ranch fence was right in front of us, but there was no one to be seen. I stood for a few moments peering about when, to my left, the sounds of someone running caught my attention. A soldier in green camouflage came charging out of the dense underbrush and stopped short in the clearing. Obviously looking for someone, he crouched, scanning anxiously the fence line. The view of the other side of the railing, however, was obscured by dense brush and foliage. From a distance I could hear the sounds of machine gun fire and barking dogs moving in our direction. The thought entered my mind that this was a drug raid. There came a flurry of emotion, and I spotted a dark-haired young man crashing through the foliage on the other side of the fence. Diving to his hands and knees, he began desperately crawling through the horizontal planks toward the clearing. The soldier, now less than 100 feet away, quickly raised his rifle and fired twice. The bullets ripped through the back of the young man's neck just as he was partway through the fence. His head dropped and his body collapsed lifelessly over the bottom rail. Then it was as if time stood still. Long moments passed as I stood riveted to my spot. Stunned by what I had witnessed, I was also puzzled. This was different than the other retrievals. All the earlier cases had been presented after death had occurred, not while it was happening. Previously, I had either been given the details by my guides or had probed the thoughts of the affected soul. This time, however, I was right there, as if it were just happening. Could it be that we had actually traveled back in time to the exact moment of the event? Not knowing what to make of it, I returned my mind to the task at hand. Marcos's thoughts were frantic. In that instant, he knew his neck was broken and he would soon be dead. In shock and disbelief, he began to pray. Moving to within just a few feet of him, I called his name, Marcos. Continuing his Spanish prayer, he obviously hadn't heard me. Marcos, I repeated loudly and firmly. This time he stopped praying and fell into a dead silence. Then, as if deciding that he must have been hearing things, he returned to his prayers with renewed vigor. At this point, I wasn't too sure what to do, but I had to get his attention. Offering a quick prayer of my own, I asked for help and guidance. A moment later, I felt a strange new energy swirling through my body. It intensified until it began literally to radiate from my fingertips. My hands felt scorching hot. Knowing there must be a good reason for the energy flow, I bent down and placing my hand on the back of his head, I again called out his name. Breakthrough! In the middle of a word, he stopped praying. Then, with gushing sobs, he began to cry. Marcos, I repeated softly, trying to soothe him. Everything is okay. Your neck is all right. You can get up now. Look, your grandfather, Alejandro, is here to see you. As the words were coming out of my mouth, a stunning realization hit me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My thoughts were in English, but my words were not. I clearly heard myself speaking Spanish, yet I hadn't a clue how to speak Spanish. Momentarily dumbfounded, I didn't have time to give it much thought. Marcos began to stir. Slowly raising his head, he glanced at me, and then turned in the direction of his deceased grandfather. With a loud cry, he let go a burst of unintelligible expletives. I didn't know if he was cursing or praying, but suspected a bit of both. Seemingly forgetting his injuries, Marcos jumped to his feet, his energy body passing through the upper fence boards like they weren't there. A big smile spread across his face. Fixated, he gingerly stepped around me and rushed to his grandfather's embrace. As I turned to follow him in the next instant, Marcos, his grandfather, and everything around us simply vanished. With a resounding jolt, I slammed back into my body. The session was over. As I lay in the darkness reliving the fascinating images, numerous questions plagued my mind. Had I actually gone back in time to view an event while it was happening? A fluent Spanish dialogue had flowed from my mind. Where did it come from? Had I spoken Spanish before? Perhaps in another lifetime. I knew I might never know the answers to these questions, and perhaps it didn't matter. Had I spoken Spanish before? Perhaps in another lifetime? I knew I might never know the answer to these questions, and perhaps it didn't matter. The questions themselves could be more intriguing than the answers. True, the questions themselves can be more interesting than the answers. And a couple of points I wanted to note. As you move onward in this work, you will find that you can go backwards and forwards in time. You'll probably go backwards first, because your mind can accept that somewhat through various sci-fi, Twilight Zone scenarios. Moving forward in time is usually a bit more of a challenge. At least getting your brain to accept that you can do it is the biggest challenge. But it can and does happen, especially when retrievals are concerned. And you'll notice when he was watching the young man get shot and killed over the fence, he said something about, then it was as if time stood still. That can happen too. Now, whether his guides beyond him made time stand still, tech guides can do that, or he did it himself and didn't realize he had that power. I'm not quite sure. But when you hear of aliens doing abductions, and in order to take the person they want, or the energy body of the person they want, they freeze frame everything around. And then the people don't know anything's happened, and they're freeze framed for a couple of hours and then unfreeze framed later. Well, when we're in spirit, in our spirit bodies, and we're educated in this fashion, I'm not saying newbies can do it right off the bat, we can do this too. And I think it's important to realize that a lot, not all, but a lot of what aliens do in seemingly untouchable wizardry are operations that we can perform when we're educated in our astral bodies. And I've been saying this on and off for years, but I'm going to say it again here. So keep that in mind. Some stuff about Paul's mother. He'll go back here to express the mother's illness. And how he met her afterwards. I know we've done one of these before, but I think it's good to do another one. Some things I knew to be true were without a doubt. I know there's definitely a God, but I wasn't sure about who or what God is. From Melder's revelations, it seemed as though we are all part of God, even though, more incredibly, as a collective unit, we are God. I accepted the premise that we are eternal and that the great majority of us do not come into the world just once, but incarnate many, many times. Working through our goals and trials, we hope to eventually achieve perfection and ultimately the realization of being one with God. Oh, I'll go for that. Also, I understood that we, and apparently every other living thing in the universe, are connected at a spiritual or pure energy level. Being all part of the experience, we could also experience all of the parts. These things felt right and true in my heart, but there were still so many things I didn't know and couldn't comprehend. In terms of spiritual knowledge, I was still in kindergarten. Having lived a difficult and tormented life, my mother, racked with cancer and Parkinson's disease, finally gave up her body on her 81st birthday. Nice timing. Although grief-stricken at her passing, our family was relieved that she would no longer have to endure the suffering in her final years. Most of us were with her in the hospital when she made the transition. By that time in my life, I had a completely different view of death than my devoutly Catholic siblings. A few months earlier, as it became apparent her condition was terminal, she had been afraid of dying, uncertain if she was good enough to be allowed into heaven. Undoubtedly, throughout her life, she had heard far too many sermons of hellfire and damnation. Although we all thought she could be sainted, she worried that she might somehow be lacking. Common problem with Christians, that. Not feeling that they're good enough to go into heaven. And when you're doing retrievals with earthbound Christians, that's the main issue. Not habitual drunkenness or drug addiction or sex obsession or gambling obsession, but I'm not good enough. And believe me, I've worked with that a lot. In those final moments, while holding her hand, I spoke with her through my thoughts, encouraging her to let go, to go to the light. I promised her that she would be going to a wonderful place where she'd be happy and free of her crippling diseases. I assured her that Grandma and Grandpa would be there to greet her, and I told her that she would be able to fly. Although my sisters and brothers wept with grief and a large lump formed in my throat, I tried to maintain positive thoughts. This, I told myself, was a wonderful occasion, and we should be happy for our mother's return home. I would not and could not cry. Near the end, as her life force began to withdraw, a noticeable change came over the energy in her body. I knew she was ready to leave and closed my eyes, hoping to be able to witness her transition. But it was not to be. With all the anxious thoughts flooding my brain, I wasn't able to step up my vibrations or see beyond the insides of my eyelids. Although I couldn't see her, I was able to feel her subtle vibration as she floated to the ceiling in the upper right-hand corner of the room. I sensed her elation and wonder. Moments later, when I strained to open my inner vision, her vibration faded and she was gone. My eyes still closed, I pronounced a final message, projecting it in her direction. Bye, Mom. I'll see you soon. This had all happened about a year before my Lifeline seminar. At various times during the ensuing year, I attempted to make contact with my mother while out of body, but to no avail. We've noticed that happening before, haven't we? Out of frustration, I stopped trying. I knew that if it were meant to be, someday I would meet her again on the other side. I had learned through trial and error that if I became obsessed with trying to achieve a certain experience, it would usually elude me until I least expected it. Oh, so true. The more you try, the harder it gets. Not sure why. But just accept it. Effort's not all that it's cracked up to be. About a month after I returned from the Monroe Institute, it was my mother who came to visit me. I had gone to bed late. As I floated at the edge of sleep, a fluttering vibration began to slowly surface in my awareness. Tired as I was, I couldn't resist the opportunity for an adventure. Taking mental control of the vibrations, I moved quickly through the threshold of consciousness, attempting to home in on the frequency that led to the park. But nothing happened. For several more minutes I lay in bed, trying to focus my thoughts while fighting off sleep. It appeared that I was going to lose the struggle, and slowly I drifted into oblivion. A loud thud quickly brought me to awareness. To my surprise, I found myself floating near the bedroom ceiling, and the sound of a woman's soft voice calling my name. Startled, I turned in the direction of the voice. To my total bewilderment, a large portion of the bedroom wall began to swirl in a dim mist before opening into a tunnel-like vortex about 6 feet in diameter. Near the center of the opening, moving in my direction, was an oval of shimmering light. Projecting my senses, I probed the light to identify the approaching entity. Almost immediately, a vibration of familiar love permeated my entire being. I had not the slightest doubt. It was my mother. The anticipation was exhilarating. I watched as the light moved slowly in my direction. Was this the form that my mother now inhabited? Was this the true form of all spirits? Within moments, the glowing oval floated through the wall and into my bedroom. Once inside the room, it stopped, and with a gentle, mesmerizing swirl, it began to transform into a familiar human shape. My mother did not appear at all like the withered, tired 81-year-old I had last seen. She looked to be in the prime of life, between 35 and 40 years old. She was simply radiant. Even though I wasn't in my body, I could feel the pounding of my heart. I had not anticipated anything like this. My mother exuded such a wonderful peacefulness about her that I ached with happiness. As she stretched out her arms, I moved to embrace her. The instant we touched, I felt a rush of energy. The bedroom faded, and the next thing I knew, we were in the park. Surprised, I had no idea how this movement had taken place. Pulling back from her embrace, I looked into her eyes. They were beaming with happiness and reassurance. In my mind, I heard her voice. "It's easier to talk to you here." For a moment, I felt Melder's vibration nearby, then it faded. I had the impression that he'd been assisting in this reunion and then withdrew to give us privacy. Guides are good at that. "Mom, you look wonderful," I gushed. "It's so great to see you." "It's so beautiful over here," she said. "All the pain is gone. And see," she held up her hands, "I don't shake anymore." I couldn't take my eyes off hers. Beaming brilliantly back to me, they carried the knowledge and memories of so much of my life. How many times had I looked into those wonderful eyes to see the pain and tears of a hard and unrewarding life? How many times had I fought back my own tears for the deep disappointment I saw in those eyes? Disappointment and frustration at the things that she wanted to give but couldn't. How many times as a boy had I been comforted by the warm, unconditional love that shone in those eyes, when the rest of the world seemed cruel and unforgiving? All those thoughts and feelings flowed through my mind. For the all too few times that I would see happiness in those eyes, I would also see years of sadness and yearning. No, it was different. No longer was there sadness or disappointment. I now saw only happiness and the kind of contentment that could perhaps only be realized by someone who had gone through great tribulation and triumphed. Bursting with joy, I wouldn't have traded that moment for all the gold in the world. Good. "It's okay," she said, knowing my thoughts. "It's all part of the learning experience that we choose. It might have seemed pretty hard at the time. Sometimes I wanted to quit, but it was worth it." I was puzzled. "You mean you wanted a life like that?" "Yes, of course. It wasn't actually so bad, you know. We've been through tougher lifetimes than that." In order for us to get what we need out of it, it's so important that we don't remember that we ourselves chose the kind of life we wanted to experience. You and the rest of your brothers and sisters are part of the plan we all put together. That's how it all works. We all put together? I was confused. You were saying we all wanted a life like that? You mean we came here knowing what was going to happen and how it was going to turn out? Well, sort of. She smiled coyly, a gleam in her eyes. We don't always know how these things will turn out, but we put ourselves into circumstances where there can be a number of possibilities and outcomes. It all depends on the choices we make and how we deal with the situations we put ourselves into. Before I was born, I already knew how I was going to die. "Geez, Mom, that's kind of spooky," I said in a serious tone. Almost immediately, the silliness of my statement became glaringly apparent. We both burst into laughter. Here I was, talking to a spirit of my dead mother, proclaiming that what she was telling me was spooky. We giggled about this for some time. For several moments, we stood with arms entwined, enjoying each other's vibrations and our own memories. The meeting was so completely different than I had ever imagined it to be. I marveled at the remarkable change in my mother. Yes, she was still the same wonderful person I'd always known, but it was our relationship that was different. We seemed to be relating to each other like old friends meeting again after a brief separation. It wasn't the same type of mother-son relationship we had experienced in our physical bodies. It was a much deeper and older one than that. It was like we had known each other for a long, long time. Finally, I broke the silence. It's been amazing. Sometimes I can hardly believe everything has been happening. My life has changed so much in the last few years. Yes, I know, she smiled. I've been keeping track of you. You have? Thank you, I responded. I think about you a lot. Sometimes I dream about you. I know, she said, her eyes hinting of sadness. You've been punishing yourself because you thought you could have spent more time with me in those last few years. But you didn't need to worry. I knew how you felt. I knew how it hurt you to see me wither away, and I hurt for you. I still felt your love. You don't need to feel that way anymore. I was now beginning to fight off tears. I didn't want to be crying. I didn't want to be sad. I changed the subject. So, how does it feel? Oh, you mean how does it feel to die? You mean you don't remember? Oh, of course you don't. But you've come close a couple of times, haven't you? It was wonderful. The dying part, that is. The sickness and pain beforehand wasn't so easy, but the actual dying was great. Oh, and I want to thank you for your help when I finally was able to leave. And thank the rest of the kids for their prayers, too. It did help a lot. I was really scared. It was kind of strange at the time because I could hear your voice in my mind. I thought I was dreaming. But I could hear you and some of the other kids. It made me feel better, though. And then Grandpa came and told me I had to come with him. Pausing for a moment, she had an idea. Here's a better way to show you what it was like. A visible stream of mental energy began flowing from her to me, and I became immediately immersed in her reality. I felt her emotions. I saw what she saw. I experienced what she experienced. Instantly transported back to our old hospital room, I felt myself and her float to the ceiling. Below me, I could see myself sitting beside her. I could see her frail body withered, and my sisters and brothers sitting quietly, watching, tears in their eyes. I felt the sympathy and love that she felt. I felt the tug at her spirit as my grandfather's face appeared in her mind. Amazement transformed to elation as I felt myself drawn through a tunnel-like darkness, moving towards a powerful vortex of light. At first only a small glow in the distance, the light became brighter as I sped along. Anticipation and yearning consumed me, pulling me along. Then, as waves of energy swept through me, the journey ended, and I felt myself bathed in a beautiful golden light. The warmth and love of all consciousness overcame me like a narcotic. Soon everything began to fade, and in a dizzying, spinning euphoria, I lapsed into a blissful sleep. I wasn't sure how long we slept, but my next awareness was of awakening from a peaceful, dream-filled sleep. Through my mother's eyes, I awoke to a softly lit, immaculately clean, white hospital room. Around her were a number of loved ones who had passed on before. I recognized the beaming faces of my grandfather and grandmother, my brother-in-law Albert, and a number of aunts and uncles, all there to welcome my mother home. With that final scene, the thought transference ended, the vibrations subsided, and I was left with a wonderful sense of peace and happiness. It took me a few moments to recover. This method of communication, telepathy, thought transference, whatever, it was incredible. Complete in every respect, there was no room for error or interpretation. Oh, I like that. No room for error or interpretation. That means it's revelation. According to me, anyway. I experienced what she had experienced. It did, however, leave me puzzled. Why had my mother awakened on the other side in a hospital room? I thought everyone was whole and healthy in the spirit realm. There should be no need of hospitals. Picking up on my thoughts, Mom explained, they tell me that if a person has had a long, painful death in an earth hospital, their spirit energy can become weak and run down. Disease in the physical body can also affect the energy body and vice versa. People in that condition can also become very accustomed to their surroundings. It helps make the transition to spirit so much easier if they wake up in a familiar room where they're being cared for. It can also take time for a person to restore their energy after they arrive. A hospital is a comfortable and natural way to do it. There's nothing but love and caring here. While she was explaining these things to me, a remote tug in my awareness began urging me back to my body. I tried to resist the pull. I needed more time. There were still so many questions to ask. I wanted to find out about other lives that we might have lived together, about how my brothers and sisters were connected, and how she spent her time. I was about to ask if she planned on reincarnating when it became apparent I could no longer fight off the pull to return. Finally, I told her that I had to leave. My body was calling me back. With an understanding smile, she reached out to draw me near. I had time for only one last parting thought. I love you, Mom. So naturally, he has lots of questions after that. And even though, and also that transition was nice, how she pulled him into the experience of her transition. I thought that was nifty. I think I've come across it once or twice before. I don't know if I've read of one like that here on this series, but I know I've come across them. But as I've mentioned, I have a startlingly large archive. And it can be almost traumatic trying to remember where a certain quote is in a certain book. Some people are traumatized by pretty serious stuff in life, and I'm traumatized by not being able to find a quote in a book. So, what does that tell you about me? Some of the concepts my mother had told me about intrigued me. Do we really lay out a plan for our lives before we take on a physical body? Well, certainly the between life regression archives would strongly support that. I couldn't imagine that she would have chosen the type of life she had endured for 80 years. For that matter, if I had any choice in the matter, why would I have chosen the circumstances of my childhood? Certainly there must have been any number of easier options. Why wouldn't I chosen to be born into a rich family? And did this mean that we choose our parents? What about the starving, emaciated children we often see on television in some far-off country? Why would they have chosen such terrible existences where they could die of starvation or disease before reaching the age of 5? Well, that's a question I've often had people meditate on when I have seminars here. It's interesting to see what various people come up with, because obviously there's no one answer. And we in the relatively well-off, peaceful West often wonder about these things, and we tend to forget past lives where we've suffered greatly from poverty, disease, malnutrition, etc., etc. Because let's face it, who wants to think about that? But we've been there. Trust me, we've been there. At my first opportunity, I would pay Melder a visit with these mind-boggling questions and possibilities. What else could I do? After a hectic schedule, he says, then one Saturday morning, it was Melder who decided to take the initiative. And I remember awaking in a dreamy, relaxed state. But as I lay in bed, I began to feel a gentle tingling in my forehead. Good morning, sleepyhead. Are you ready for today's lesson? He was sitting on a large boulder looking for all the world like a canary swallowing cat. It's the squirrel guide, I chortled. Where have you been? At this, Melder burst into such an uproarious laugh he almost rolled off the boulder. Very funny, he howled. Squirrel guide, girl guide, and you do all this while you're still half asleep. Hey, mister, he roared, you want to buy some cookies? Melder continued laughing so hard he appeared to be hyperventilating. Tears streamed down his face. As infectious as his mirth may have been, I tried to remain unaffected, looking on with feigned bemusement. Oh, a regular bloody comedian, I quipped. This, however, only sent him into more spasms. No longer able to hang on to his perch, he rolled off the boulder and fell howling to his hands and knees, where he continued to carry on. Geez, I could do with an afternoon like that, rolling around screeching with laughter. When he finally began to catch his breath and settle down, Melder let out a big sigh. Boy, it's times like these I sure miss having a body. There's nothing quite like laughing till your sides hurt. After a few moments of chuckling, he got down to business. So you have some questions? And I think I have the answers? I'm not so sure these are the answers to my questions, he began, but I thought if anyone would know you would. Well, I don't know if I have all the answers, but I'll certainly give it a try. I want to learn more about how things work in the spirit world. I continue. Do we actually decide before we come here the type of life we'll have and how we'll die? Do we choose our own parents? Do we set up our own challenges to overcome? How does it all work? Ah, the big question, he replied. Yes, I think it's something we can communicate to you. First, as I have alluded to you before, you should know that you and most every other incarnated being already knows most of the answers to these questions. It's not so much of learning about these things as it is a matter of remembering what you already know. Ah, Plato's theories of knowledge, remembering what you already know. So things don't change that much. Plato enunciated that theory 2,000 more years ago? Things don't change much, do they? Most of us have made the transition from spirit to physical life and back many, many times. Each time we return, the memory of our origin slowly fades from awareness. By the time a child has reached the age of 6, most of the memory of its true spiritual nature has been filtered out by physical consciousness, leaving the imprint only in the subconscious and the soul. The density of the physical body puts a tremendous restriction on the sensory perceptions of the spirit. As a child grows in size and physical awareness, the genetics of the species, with its powerful built-in survival instinct, becomes more and more dominant, leaving a decreasing memory of its true spiritual reality. Our teachers have told us that we all began as part of one great consciousness. Melder, even Melder has teachers. Well, everybody does. Even the teachers of teachers and the teachers' teachers of teachers. It just keeps going on up and up and up and up. And, talking about initiations, the planet Earth goes through initiations as well, not just you and me and the fellow down the street. But that's another story. In order to experience diversity, now there's a trendy word, and honor every continuing creation, we as parts of the Creator agreed to become individuated and split off from the source. By doing so, the all, which you refer to as God, could experience itself in endless evolving form and reality. Like individual drops of water in the ocean, we are still one and flow together as part of the whole ocean of consciousness. Therefore, what we experience as individuated beings, seemingly in isolation, is actually also experienced by the all at various levels of understanding and consciousness. God, as you understand it, continues to seek perfection. It is never addressed, but continually moving, creating, and experiencing through all aspects of its colossal energy. As individuated parts of the Creator's energy, we seek the same perfection that is sought by God. God seeks perfection? That is to become fully aware, flowing and vibrating together as one unified consciousness. We seek as part of God to bring every individuated aspect, every soul, to the perfect love of God realization. Here we go. Meldar, I interrupted. You made a reference a few moments ago to what your teachers have told you. Are you saying you have teachers? Oh, most definitely. We all have teachers. There are many, many levels of spiritual vibration and realization. The physical world that you now occupy is among the lowest levels of vibration and consciousness. Because the Earth is of such dense physical nature with harsh realities, it is one of the most powerful levels to gain experience and meaningful development. There's a tremendous opportunity for growth and advancement in the Earth plane. Indeed, there is. And Melder will just go nattering on and on and on, as teachers are wont to do. As I will do if you give me half a chance. Lots of good stuff in that book, as I've said like 15 times before. It's all worth pondering as you meditate and go through your own journey. It's a marvelous adventure with its ups and downs and its bumps along the way. And we will continue very shortly with number 58. So long for now.